This is the Enduring Minds podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, where we go the distance and break the silence together. I am one of your hosts, Evan Birch, and I am joined by my beautiful friend, co-host, Jason Bahamundi. Mr. Jason, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. The word beautiful is getting used enough, maybe not enough on our podcast. So I'm glad to hear it again.
I'm gonna keep harping. You know what? We've had great response to it, and I think it's an all-encompassing word that doesn't get used enough. So, what is next up for you on the race agenda?
So this podcast will drop on July 22nd, this episode, and on July 26th, 4 days later, I will be racing the San Francisco Marathon. So right now, what I'm trying to do is figure out how to get my runs in while also moving to Phoenix. We're leaving LA at the end of the month. So it's been something, let's put it that way.
Yeah, you're definitely getting your lifting in. Let's just say that.
Yes, strength training is in.
Yeah. And then for me, I have when this airs, I'll have finished QMT 135 out in Quebec. So I'll be training over the next 3 weeks because we're recording this about 3 weeks prior to that. So I got a lot of training to put in. I'm excited. My body is responding the way that I wanted it to after my 60K, and I am hungry as ever.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah. So our guest today is just like a titan of extreme endurance. Marshall Ulrich. He has conquered 7 summits across Death Valley, run entirely across America, but his legendary status didn't start with that quest for records. It really began as that survival mechanism to manage trauma of seeing his first wife battle terminal cancer, and Marshall turned to the trails to process profound grief and confront the brutal isolation of obsession. And today we're bypassing the statistics to focus entirely on really running as a translation for the toll, the self-reliance on family, and what that means when you strip away everything. But really the next step, obviously, is bringing Marshall onto the show. So welcome to Enduring Minds, Marshall.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I talked to Jason once before. It's been a while, but so we're kind of refreshing things just a little bit and bringing everybody up to date on what's happening, I guess.
Absolutely. Jason's bringing me into the fold with all these legends that he's been able to chat with over the years, which is, it's an honor to be able to chat with you, Marshall. I know you're a very humble person, but for our guests that don't know who you are, who is Marshall Ulrich?
Well, I'm a grandfather now, a father. I have 3 kids. I'm happily married to Heather Ulrich, who, sort of more than tags along. She's the emotional support, and she's the reason why I'm able to have done what I have done and will continue to do other things too. So that's who I am. I'm sort of a father, a husband, and on the side, I do a little bit of adventure racing and mountaineering and stuff like that.
So we asked this question on the show, and it is amazing to me the responses that we get, because sometimes we get runner first, and usually it's because the person has just finished a race or has just finished a training run before they come on the show. And then other times we get what I believe to be the truest answer of who you are, which is, you said grandfather, father, husband, and what you do, which is adventure racing. If you had to dissect your own response, why was grandfather the first thing that came out and adventure racer, runner, the last thing that came out?
Well, I think it has to do with priorities as we work through life. We kind of come in touch with, life is very fragile and we only have a limited time. So we leave a legacy of sorts. And so the legacy for me is, my grandkids. And so I'm excited to see them grow up. And, I hope that I'm leaving them some sort of a piece of me and just, the fortitude that I had and, things like that. But, more than anything, I just want them to know that and remember me as being a good person. So, that's the main thing. And then, working through it, of course, Heather being, married and everything to her and family, all that is just so ultra important. and they've been with me through a lot of good times and bad times, and they've supported me and kept me, on going the right direction and everything too. So they hold me accountable, so I can hold myself accountable, and just be once again a good person. So it kind of filters down, and then it gets into of course, some of the things that I've done in the past, and so I look at that as not so important, but it kind of put me in a position to be who I am right now, which I'd like to think I'm getting a little more wisdom, and more so than that, I think what I've discovered is my fallacies. And so it really points out my fallacies, and that's kind of the emphasis on what I've done in the past, that it's hopefully made me a better person. And some people pay attention to what I do, and that's all great. uh, they can go out and do things that they didn't think they could do, which is one of the acumens that I was doing with my sports. But uh, if they're paying attention and they derive something positive from what I've done, then that's great too.
Yeah, that word presence is such a powerful word. And having two kids of my own, 8 and 11, and seeing my dad as their grandfather. And I mean, my dad's 83. He still works 4 days a week, full time, and he still puts them up on his shoulders. And just the amount of love and connection that I see between them and how much they adore him. And I can just see it in your eyes and in your voice, like that you have that same connection to your grandkids. I can just see it. I can feel it in the way that you're speaking about them. And I think presence is one of those things that we can learn it. It's a skill. It's something you have to actively choose all the time. It's a choice. And I would imagine everything you've done through your running career, all of that time and learning and how to understand what that presence actually is, because you can't do the things that you've done in the sports space without having that presence. So how have you taken what you've learned through sport and through ultra into being a grandfather?
Well, I think what it does, the way it really manifests itself, is that I have more, just like you were saying, of a presence. Where before I probably wouldn't pay so much attention to my marriage and have such gratitude for it, or my family. So I'm really starting to connect with my family. And I have a short story that sort of, I'll segue into that. And I may have told Jason this, I don't know, but when I went off to climb Mount Everest, my oldest daughter, who is now approaching 50, she was in her early 20s. And I can remember that she called me up, and this was about less than a few days before I went to Everest. And at that time, it wasn't quite so popular, and I climbed from the north side. So, it was a little bit dicey and stuff like that. And I can remember talking to her, and she called me a, selfish son of a bitch. And I'm glad that she did that, but it brought me to tears. And um, I might add that I went anyhow. I'd had everything prearranged, but that's all an excuse and everything. But she was 100% accurate. That was probably one of the most selfish things that I could do, because they could have lost me. Fortunately, I had had some experiences with mountaineering and adventure racing and stuff like that. So I was pretty confident that I could make, wise decision on the mountain, which I did. So I'm kind of getting off topic there just a little bit, but that sort of brings us into the here and now, where I appreciate them. I appreciate that comment that she made. And I think more than anything, it's given me, looking back, a gratitude for some of the things that I was able to do. And mostly it was because of them, whether they think so or not. It was because of them and their support. And they kind of allowed me to do that, and allowed me to be myself. And, at times I was selfish, and, that's very unfortunate. But I can fess up to it and move on and connect with them as a family now. So, I think, getting older, I don't know if we get any wiser, but, I certainly am enjoying myself more now. And I think I'm connecting to the person that I would have liked to have been, but couldn't admit back then.
I think the idea of I don't know if we get any wiser leads into this idea that I had as you were talking, which is perspective, right? That statement gave you perspective. And I think as we gain perspective, we do get wiser. So this is, I think, episode 23 of season 2, which is about 50 episodes into this podcast's history. And one of the things I really love hearing from people is through all of their trials and tribulations, through all of the obstacles, whether they've overcome them or not, is this ability to gain perspective on them. And so the question I want to ask you is, after that statement was made to you and you still went and did it and you gained perspective and from that one statement, when you look at things today, now, number of years later, and you look at some of the people that you've touched in life and some of the people that have touched you in life, do you still find yourself gaining that perspective of, I can do hard things, but do I need to do those hard things? I can sit this one out because it's not that important to me, and being present for somebody else is.
Yeah, I think so. I continue to learn, and I even think it's, the learning is accelerated just a little bit, just because I do have that more of an awareness of what I think is really important, such as family. So, I'm going to make a statement that is kind of tough, maybe for some people to understand, but just running itself, I'm putting it more in a perspective of I can do it for enjoyment instead of having some sort of an agenda, such as, winning, like it or not, was important at one point, but it becomes less and less important. It's more about the experience of being out there and just doing it. And so, I don't have to be out there racing. I don't have to be out there competing. I can just do it for the joy of it. And so it's kind of let me off the hook. And, I can go out the door and I can think to myself, I'm going to just walk 3 to 5 miles instead of having to, gut it out and run and, beat myself up and stuff like that. So, I think it has allowed me to get a little bit more grounded than I was, for sure. And, I'm that's one of the titles of my book, not to, promote. It's um, about, being grounded, both feet on the ground. So, I think I started getting that perspective with that book, and people wanted to hear about things. So, I talk about things that I've done, but the main focus of that is how to get grounded, I guess.
Yeah, this I don't know if you've heard this idea of the difference between mindfulness and mindlessness.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot of people that are running mindlessly right now. They're chasing all these things, they're chasing these accolades, they're chasing this stuff. But the mindfulness aspect of actually making the choice and consciously choosing to know, again, the presence of where your feet are, being where you are, not worrying about what other people are going to do or say, like actually running from this place of like self-love, joy, compassion, vulnerability, whatever it is, like that's where the true growth happens. That podium becomes a memory after the next day, and then what do you do with it? It's
right,
one of those things that I've thought a lot about. So that's what I heard in what you were saying there, is like you're running
right.
mindfully and just like being present with yourself, which is not an easy thing to do for a lot of people.
Yeah,
um, and I mean, I just want to touch one thing on when you were talking about your family and giving back to your family at the age that you are, and like seeing your grandkids. Like I know my dad is trying to give my kids the things that he maybe thought that he didn't give me, and I see it and I know it. I don't acknowledge it for him. I don't like say, "Oh, you're doing that for them, but you never did that for me." I'm like, you know what? You did the best that you could with what you had at the time, and now you're doing it for them. And I am super grateful that you are, because they're going to grow up in a completely different way. So I just want to say that, like, whatever you're doing with them, like, I see it, my dad's doing it, and I absolutely love him for it. And I'm sure your kids are the same way, seeing you just like come out of this like shell of, again, what they might have thought was selfish or all those other things in the past of doing these things for you, but now you're there for their kids, and all that stuff gets wiped away, which is a beautiful, beautiful way to think about it. My question for you now is, so many people ask, how do you get into ultra running? Is it, moving from one distance to the other? Like what is the choice? So what was your choice, and how did you get into the actual ultra running space early on in your career?
Yeah, so you touched upon it, and when I lost my first wife, I had to deal with high blood pressure, and so I started running, and it was shorter distances, but I think pretty rapidly, within a year or so. So I was, basically 30 years old. Within a few months, I was already marathoning, and then I'm looking around for something else to do. Um, so within 3 or 4 years, there was the Rocky Mountain, 50 up in Cheyenne, and I decided I'm going to go up and do that. And it's just kind of a one-off thing. I probably won't do a distance like that ever again. So I kind of latched on to that, and it just became, I liked the challenge of it, and I was, reasonably good at it. So I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to keep going and see where this leads me. Which, in that respect, I'm glad I did, that I bumped into it, even though it was sort of a adverse relationship that I had with it, trying to cope with, just the death of my wife. But then, it sort of opened the door for adventure racing, and the adventure racing kind of opened my eyes. With the ultra running, I was kind of an island unto myself, and I could be out there trying to process all this grief and stuff, which was really difficult to do, and I needed help with that, but didn't realize it. But then, I started doing the adventure racing thing, which was really a team sport. Not that ultra running isn't, because you usually have a crew and stuff and people in the background. But I started doing that, and the friendships I developed, such as we talked a little bit about Mark Macy, who just passed away this past Monday. But it became not so much about, well, it became a lot about being out in the wilderness, and I think that makes us whole. So it's twofold. But then it taught me friendships. So we developed the team Stray Dogs way back in the first Eco Challenge in 1995. And to this day, there are four of us, Lisa Smith Batchen, who you just had on your show, plus Bob Haw and Mark Macy and myself. So the four of us were essentially the oldest adventure racing team, and we still do things together. Although, not with intensity and stuff, but we just hung in there, and it developed the friendships that I had no idea. And I feel so privileged to have met these people, because they were such great mentors for me. So then, I got into mountaineering, and it was the same type of thing, where it's kind of a team sport. You're not out there climbing this mountain by yourself. And I was climbing with a bunch of Russians who, there's just a few of them that spoke the language, but they became like brothers. The difference with the Russians is you had to prove yourself, and they really didn't, think about too much else except for climbing, but they did give a shit. And so, it sort of opened my eyes to, an ancillary world that is out there that I never even knew existed, and that we all, love, we all hurt the same. It's we're all cut out of the same type of glue, or we're all the same, basically, only a little bit different. So I'm kind of going off on a different thing, and I don't know if I'm answering your questions, but it just sort of gave me the ability to evolve, and that's what it's all about.
I didn't realize this at the time, but mentioning Lisa and yourself at the Eco Challenge, and we've had Corey Waltering on our show too. We might have the most Eco Challenge participants in podcast history on our show.
That's right. I'd forgotten about Corey.
Yeah.
How did you hook up with him? Holy cow.
We have had Corey on, I think, 3 different shows, and we do it the way we do everything else. We just reach out and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. You're interested?
Nice.
One of the things I want to touch on, because we've talked about legacy. You said you want to leave a legacy for your grandkids. We've talked about perspective. We've talked about the loss of your wife, and now you mentioned the loss of Mark Macy, and there's another Badwater legend, Badwater Ben, who has also passed away. And I want to get your perspective on the legacy that Mark and Badwater Ben have left on you. I'm treating you as the grandkid to those 2 participants, and what are the lessons and the perspectives that they have given you that you are now passing down to your grandkids, and then the rest of us that are following your legacy and your history in these sports?
Yeah. So speaking about Ben, Badwater Ben, or the official mayor of Badwater and the first lady Denise. Those 2 people have been very influential. Ben in particular, and I had no idea. I used to go out there every year and stay in their, what was their garage, and they made it into like a little studio. So I would go out there and just kind of hang out and train and do things. But I had the privilege of, just getting to know Ben, and he, of course, he was very, very involved with the sport and embraced it, but he embraced the environment. He loved Death Valley. He used to go out there, and some of his patients had the privilege of him attending to him. Even some of the ladies of the night and things like that. So he was multifaceted, and he would be so non-judgmental. He just accepted everybody for who they were. So, that's one of the lessons he taught me, and to not draw attention to yourself. Of course, he got a lot of attention, and it was because he was a good person, which is entirely apropos, because look at all the people that he influenced, and people looked up to him. And that's how you earn the respect and the admiration of all the people. So he taught me a lot of things, and I would just hope that I could rise to that occasion or level of acceptance, or whatever you want to call it. And Mark Macy, I met him, I guess it was about 1991 or 1992. And there was I used to live in a little town called Fort Morgan where I had my business. It was rendering business. And he came up to me and he wanted to know about Badwater, because in 1990 I'd done that. So, he went out, I guess it was in 92 or 3, and he did Badwater also. And Mark was such a great influence on everyone he touched in his family. But, as well as me, because he was such a good mentor. I feel like I wasn't always, the best father, the best husband, but Mark was the most solid guy I've ever met, besides Dr. Bob. He's the same, type of person. And Lisa has blossomed into just a beautiful woman who is cut out of the same mold. So those people are so influential. Now, having lost Mark, I think the hardest part was, he is leaving a legacy, and his family was, such a beautiful family, and he is responsible for a lot of that. So, I had the great privilege of racing, 8 of the Eco Challenges. So if you figure that out, I've raced thousands of miles with that guy. And we used to joke that, I knew him better than Pam, his wife, did. And on some level, he could be honest with me, and we'd, be out there swearing and, just talking smack and this and that. But, more than anything, we'd be out there enjoying ourselves, and we really didn't give a shit about anything except, and this goes for all the stray dogs, just being with each other. And in fact, we'd be out there for 3 or 4 days or sometimes a week or whatever. And we got so accustomed to just being in each other's company that we didn't want to go back home. There was such a purity to it, that friendship. So yeah, those two people are just they were incredible, and it was hard to see Mark just deteriorate over the course of probably 8 years with Alzheimer. And he fought to the very end. So it was a tough thing to just watch him lose contact to what he really loved. It made him more connected to his family, and they benefited from that. But he lost that ability to do what he really, loved. An interesting story, if I may kind of segue into this, his sister, he called her Boo. And, it's a nickname. I believe her name is Michelle, but Boo was in the room with Mark, and, he was in the process of passing on. And the family was there, and they were talking about spirits. And do you believe in God, or are you spiritual? And, what would you be if you were some sort of animal? What would your spirit live in? And so Boo said that she was talking to everybody and they were just laughing. And she said, I'd like to be a fox. So anyhow, he passed on Monday. And I believe it was the next day or two, the whole family was up at Pam's house, and they were in the dining room, and they decided to walk outside. And as soon as they got out on the deck, they looked out, and a fox ran across the front of the house. And Boo said, I don't think I've ever seen a fox up here. And apropos, it was running. So, you can take from that what you will, and I like to interpret that as, that's just Mark saying that he's okay, because she said, if you can give me a sign that you're okay, do that, would you please? And she didn't know how to manifest itself. So, it's just kind of an interesting story. So, it kind of, I don't know, gives you a belief in the spiritual, or some sort of religion or whatever. But it's quite an extraordinary story. So Mark's still with us.
Yeah, there were signs, and I think that's again, I mean, he was beautiful again, because I think that's the word for that one. I want all the listeners to really take in what Marshall just talked about with regards to Mark and Lisa and everybody within that Stray Dogs team. He didn't once talk about the place that they finished. He didn't once talk about how good they did or how powerful they were. He talked about the people. And I think anybody coming into this sport, we are a tight knit group. Even before we started the show, we talked about 5 or 6 people that all connected us within 1 to 2 degrees without even hesitation. And that to me is just absolutely incredible, knowing how close this community is and leaning into those connections and those individuals and those people is so incredibly important. You don't know when that person is going to be able to help you, outpace you, crew you, support you. So, I mean, I just want people to listen back, rewind it, listen back to the last 5 to 10 minutes that Marshall just talked about, and really take that in, because I think it's super important. I want to move to your relationship with your wife, Heather. So I know you've credited Heather with being your emotional barometer, the one that keeps you in check with your desire to go out and do these things. How does an inherently independent athlete learn to stop relying on solely themselves to share not only just the internal weight of life, but just the things that you're doing and the discomfort that you're putting yourself into with these races and events?
Well, that's a tough question, because Heather's, I look at her as kind of a one-off, because when we first met, she knew that I wanted to climb, Mount Everest. She knew what I did, all this adventure racing. She knew that I'd be away. And rather than push back on it, she embraced it. And not everybody can do that, but I think there's an interesting thing because she told me there was a adventure racing magazine. I can't even remember the name of it, but I was on the cover of it. And she told me this after we met and had dated for some time. And it might have even been after we got married. But she said, I looked at that picture and I knew that there was something that was missing, that you're lonely, you were trying to connect with people, that you were sort of lost. And I mean, I was shocked that she said that, but I mean, she could see it in my eyes from a picture on a magazine, for crying out loud. So she's an extraordinary person, but I think we're all extraordinary, and I think we can learn. She teaches by modeling, and I think that the more that we can do that, and she's a master at it. And so I pay attention very carefully to her because she's taught me a lot. My family was they're Germans and they're a little more stoic, and I can remember my mom a lot of times when we'd say goodbye, she'd shake my hand when I was an adult. So it wasn't the touchy-feely type thing, but with Heather and her family, is a part of that also. They were teaching me how to love more fully. So I was very fortunate, and I don't know if I'm answering your questions, but she embraced what I was doing, and she traveled with me, and she was support. Take for instance, when I ran across America, oh my God, I mean, if you think that was brutal on me, it was more brutal on her. She was sleeping less. She was taking care of me. She was there, every mile or two to give me a drink, to do this, to do that. So she was on 24/7 for 52 days straight. So, what kind of a person does that? So, she just has that innate ability. And so I hang around her, and, of course she's my wife. So, I don't, that's not a brushstroke that is taken lightly, but I hang around her because she teaches me so much. And, including her, I think is why she embraced that, and having the wherewithal to just say thank you or have gratitude for her. I think it encourages that type of behavior. But I think, we really, really have to pay attention, not so much to the sport, but how it's affecting other people and how much they're supporting us. So, maybe that's helpful for somebody else, that, you can't take them for granted. I mean, the crew is very, like out at Badwater or something, you just dry up and cry out there if you didn't have them. So you better damn well treat them well.
Yeah, Jason and I, like, we place our wives, Jason's wife Lori and my wife Cassie, on that same exact pedestal. Cassie has been at every major long distance ultra except for I think one for me, crewing, being in the trenches. I mean, she basically rubbed my feet and cleaned my feet and put my feet up, took care of me, fed me. All, I mean, the one that I can remember is LA to Vegas. Like, we had an RV with the Speed Project, and she was there the entire time. She could sleep. We had a couple other people, but she basically had less sleep than, I mean, I had only 5 hours of sleep, and she's like, I probably had about the same. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that one about, like, appreciate the people that are doing this alongside of you, and you are going to go even further. So,
as you were talking, Marshall, I wrote down honesty and learning to love more fully. And that's exactly what I got from my wife, Lori, when we first got together. She was, I guess, brutally honest. That might be too harsh of a word with me, about me having disordered eating. And it was really hard to hear. And we had that discussion, and it came out. I was like, you are correct. I fought it. Don't get me wrong. I fought it. And then I realized that she was correct. And I think the reality for myself, and from what I heard in your conversation, is our accomplishments in these spaces are shared with our wives. Absolutely. But I think they're elevated even more so because of that honesty, because we've learned to love ourselves. And so once we learn to love ourselves, we can pass that back to them. And now we're celebrating together as opposed to individual style. And so I want to ask you this question this way. So there are moments where I'm in the middle of a race and it's really, really hard, but I think about Lori and the opportunity to celebrate her sacrifice to get me to the finish line as much as I'm going to celebrate me crossing the finish line. And I wonder if you think about that in those moments when it's really hard for you and the idea of taking another step. It seems easier to just not take the step, but you think about the sacrifices that Heather has put forward so that you can get to the start line, of course, and then get to the finish line. Like, what role does that also play in your participation in these events?
Yeah, it plays a huge portion. For example, when I was up on Everest, on the sleeve of my summit suit, there's a little clear plastic compartment, if you will, that's sewed on your sleeve that unzips and zips. And I had the picture of Heather and the kids, and so on and so forth, so that they were in my mind. They were ever present in my mind. But if I ever, when I got to the top, I took it out and put it at the top because I knew that I was safe. I knew that I was going to be okay. So I don't know if she motivated me to get to the top, or the family, that picture of the family. I think mentally I just had it. And what it reminded me of more than anything is to come back. And that was the main emphasis. Being on that mountain was just a privilege in and of itself. And no matter how far I got or whatever, that was the main focus. So I think it is important to really think about our family when we're out there doing things, but also to realize that they are number one. Finishing isn't the number one thing that has to happen. And there is a good side of that, because I might mention that there's I have probably dropped out of, who knows, 24 races or more now. I took great pride the first 50 or so, never having bailed out. And it was like a huge weight lifted off of me when I finally didn't finish one. And it's like, it's okay to not finish one of these.
Mhm.
But the silver lining to it is that I learned more from my failures at those than I did finishing. It was much more of an experience that I needed to have and to learn from. So it was really a learning experience to have that happen.
You gave me the perfect segue, Marshall. I appreciate that. You literally just you literally just shared my entire last year's journey. I rolled my ankle at Tahoe 200 last June, 10 kilometers into the race. I knew it was bad. I tried to walk it off. I got to the aid station. It was a baseball. I walked on it for a little bit. I said, give me the tape. I taped up my own ankle. I had a sports med background, so I did that. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go. And I know I can get to the next aid station by dark, even if I have to walk. Let's see what I have left. Uphills, no problem. Downhills, absolutely like the worst excruciating pain I've ever felt. Then the tape started cutting into my foot and it just got so bad. I messaged my coach Ray and he's like, you got to pull out at the next aid station. Like, you're done. I messaged my wife, said, like, you got to come meet me. And just this full circle moment of what I had to endure afterwards from the recovery. Found out I tore a ligament in my ankle. First time I've ever had a major injury in 7 years of doing this. 6-month recovery, got tendonitis, more recovery, decided to double down on strength training that I've neglected for years. I've now been like 8 months of strength training 3 days a week. Coming back to it, I had my first 60K race back this last weekend, and I got to the halfway mark. And the reason why I share this story is we talk about the people and the messages, and you talk about having that picture of your wife and your kids on your wrist. And I sent my wife Cassie a message because she couldn't be at this race, And I'm just going to read it to you because this is the support that we get from the people. And I want to share it because it's like so powerful. So I said to her, I'm at the aid station leaving, send me some support the next 4 hours. This is going to be a battle. I'm ready, but it's going to be a battle. She messaged me pretty much immediately. Hello, my warrior. 1 year ago, you were at your absolute lowest. I came to get you off the Tahoe course in one of the hardest moments I've seen you face. But what followed, oh man, but what followed was a true professional athlete journey. You've battled hard back to this race. It will feel different. It will feel hard, but it's incredible. Focus on what this is meant to be for your soul, a return to challenge. And like that right there to me is like incredible. Like to know that somebody like that saw you at your absolute lowest and they're just like building you up the entire time. Like just even just thinking about it now, just like destroys me, as you can see. Whew. But just like reading those words.
Well, I think one of the takeaways from that is you showed your vulnerability, and that is a very attractive trait in and of itself. So it kind of fits in with who we are if we have to quit or something, that we can move on. We don't. So we are vulnerable. We're all vulnerable, whether we want to admit it or not. I don't mean to be preaching or anything. This is just my perspective, but I think that's an extremely valuable trait also.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Marshall.
I know you guys have seen the movie Jerry Maguire. Roy Firestone is interviewing Rod Tidwell, who's played by Cuba Gooding Jr. And Rod Tidwell says to Roy Firestone, "You're not going to make me cry, Roy. You're not going to make me cry." And I had this moment when Marshall was telling the story about the fox and Boo and Mark Macy. And I was like, Marshall, you're not going to make me cry. And now, Evan, you're not going to make me cry. So This is our Jerry Maguire moment. But I wanted to add this as a story to the DNF process as well. So I DNF'd at Javelina this past October, and I was at mile 52, and I sent a text message to Lori, and I said, I'm feeling pain in my kidneys, and I haven't urinated in I don't know how long. This is just not something I'm gonna be able to deal with, but I'm gonna walk until I finish this loop and get a 100K in. And she replied back almost immediately like, you, Evan, with not as much love, but with more brutal honesty, which was, are you an idiot? Why would you walk to get to mile 62? What's the point? Like, you've done 100Ks in the past. And I think that that's what we often need at times, because we can be our own worst enemies in moments. Like somehow, some way, DNFing at mile 60 was better than DNFing at mile 52, right? Like it didn't make any sense. And so I bring that story up because the different stories of Heather supporting Marshall and Cassie supporting Evan and Lori supporting me, they're from different perspectives, but they're all support. And one of the things I don't think we do enough of in life is ask for help. And so I think that our stories have shown that you can ask for help when you need it. And even in the what would be the worst case scenarios, with the air quote behind worst, you've got people there to help you get through it all. And so I bring that story to wrap up our section or segment on DNFing and the support that we get. But I think the reality is that the lessons we have learned from those things are the legacies that we can pass down to people as well. And I think that that's super important. I want to talk about people again in a different angle. So we have had, and let me preface it with this. I started Run, Try, Bike with the idea that I wanted to prove that there is a spot at the starting line for everybody and every body. And that means athletes of all shapes, sizes, abilities, anything you can think of. And that's what I built this business on. And we talked about Scott Davidson in the green room before we got started here. And Scott's been a guest on Enduring Minds. And Scott is a disabled athlete who's got a fantastic story. And so for those of you who are listening on audio podcast, Marshall has a shirt on for Route 66, and it's the Centennial, and Scott Davison ties into that. Why is it important for you, Marshall, that athletes like Scott who are disabled and anybody else who wants to take a risk on themselves and show up to a start line, why is that important to you to bring everybody into the fold so that they can participate in these events?
Well, of course, our tagline is, Route 66, and part of that is it's a race for everyone. So it fits into that, where I wanted that race to be, it's got a liberal cutoff time. I wanted it to be for everyone. We don't have like you have to do a 100-miler before you can come out and do our 140 miles. I can remember I went out and did some things I had no business doing. And in fact, there was one fellow who came out and he'd never run a race before in his life, and he finished 140 miles. So there's guys like Scott, and they've got a handicap. I mean, we have a difficult enough time, doing that. But for him to do that is an entirely different thing. It's a whole nother level. So one of the reasons I do that is they are setting examples for all of us, really good examples that life gets tough. And no matter how tough it is, you can still go out there and do things that anybody else can. Scott's, he's not necessarily a one-off, but I mean, he's extraordinary. We've got to, to touch base on it. There's Terry Rump, who is the blind, runner, mother runner is what she calls herself, excuse me. So, she's got a handicap. We welcome that because they're setting good examples for everybody, and they're out there pushing the limits that we don't even have. So I think it's very, very important, just to kind of touch on a couple of other things. And of course, it's the Centennial, so I'm going to do just a real fast plug or whatever. We are essentially sold out. There's only one 4-person spot left for the 100-mile. Other than that, we're basically sold out. So, having said that, I think it's very important, and a lot of extraordinary people, and that race is for everyone, and life is a race for everyone, and we just need to do it to our best ability.
And I want to add on to the idea for everyone and touch on the blind runner. So we have a member in the Everyday Athlete Clubhouse. Her name is Allison O'Reilly, and I met her last year at the Vermont 100. She is a visually impaired athlete, and I met her at all places at a porta potty in the middle of this race, and we got to talking, and she became a member of the clubhouse. She asked me if I could pace her at Vermont 100 this year, which I cannot do because it's the week before the San Francisco Marathon, but I told her put my name on the list for next year. And the reason why I want to do it is I can't physically put myself in her shoes, but I want to learn from what she goes through on a course so that I can be a better person for others. Because the concept, right? You don't really know a person unless you've walked a mile in their shoes. And that's kind of the lesson I want to take. And I'm super honored that she would even ask me to help pace and crew her. And so my words of encouragement to those of you that are listening is go pace and crew somebody who needs it more than others, because you will learn so much more about yourself in those moments, and that you can then carry on it and just make our sport of running even better because you have experience with that. So I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to add that based on the conversation we had with Scott, and I think you said her name was Terry, the blind runner. I just think it's important that we connect with athletes in that way that are not us, so that we can learn and become better humans in the sport of running. So Evan, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, Scott is, I mean, I see him like a brother. Honestly, we got connected over the last 4 years. He was probably one of the first people to raise his hand to say that he would help out when I was running from LA to Vegas in the speed project. And the amount of support his family gave me, and him coming out and pacing me on some of the last sections as we were heading back from into Vegas. Like, I remember running with him at night and us just having these conversations, and I'm sitting there like, this guy is incredible. Like, yes, I'm running these distances, but this guy is out here pumped. Like, I mean, and he's the first one to pump my tires, and I'm like, dude, like, what you're doing is absolutely incredible. Like, the number of times that he's doubted himself, and it's been incredible to see his trajectory. Because at that point when we met, I think his furthest distance was a 50K, and like, just to see his trajectory and to know, like, I know his goal is Badwater. I know long term, and he will do it. And if it has to be his way, and it doesn't have to be as part of the race, and he does it his way, more power to him. I said I will be the first one to raise my hand and be there to support you. So, I mean, Scott is, again. If you're not, we'll tag it in the show notes as well too to go listen to Scott's episode. But I mean, the guy is like so humble and so funny. Like, the jokes that we say to one another probably can't say on this show. But you know what, Marshall already knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, I just want to say that piece. But what what does it give you to see them succeed in these harsh races, these races that some people wouldn't even think about being in, like, a normal everyday able-bodied individual? Like, what do you see in that, and like, what do you feel when you see them succeed with what they're putting themselves through?
Well, I think it's a little bit, has to do with what Jason was saying. He walk a mile in their shoes or something. So if you're out there or you're just watching them, driving by and seeing them run along the course and stuff like that, I think watching them see uh, accomplish things, such as running Badwater, or whatever it is, 100 miler. I think what that does is it makes us more whole, just kind of referring to what Jason was saying, but you have to pay attention to it too. So, um, I think that's it. Just it could have more to do with us. And I think that's a good thing if you take it in a good way.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw me put my hand up when you said you had one spot left for the 100 mile. I kind of went like this, but
Oh,
maybe Jason and I'll talk about that after. We'll see what his schedule is doing. Maybe
I thought you were saying, it's time. Would you please shut up?
no, that was me slowly raising my hand, going like, pick
Yeah,
me,
okay.
pick me.
I
Yeah,
got it.
yeah. I'll let Jason.
Yeah, sometimes I'm not the brightest bulb either.
I appreciate that. That was what you thought, though. That's great.
Oh man, like I think right there, that moment of laughter and enjoying each other's company is really what all of our sports are about. It's about the camaraderie. It's about meeting quote unquote strangers at the start line who then become friends that you continue to connect with after the finish. And you may not be texting each other and emailing each other on a constant basis, but you see them post one time and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that athlete when we were racing, at this event and things like that. One thing I want to ask you, Marshall, because you have done a lot, from eco challenges to Mount Everest to 100 milers and everything in between. And this is going to be kind of like asking a parent to name their favorite kid. I get it. But is there a moment, a singular moment in your history of racing and participating that when you finished, it was the best thing, and not because it was the fastest or it was because it was the hardest, but it was that you had questioned yourself from the start line all the way to the finish line, and yet you still finished it, and you were like, this is the race, this is the event. Is there a moment that you have that you can share with us?
Well, There's actually at least a couple of them. The first one, I would say, with Everest, I had dreamed about doing that literally since I was 5 years old. And I was watching a black and white TV. This was in 1956. So, anyhow, when I got to the top, I was just overwhelmed with gratitude. And I was really glad that I felt that. It wasn't, the toughest thing that I did, but I was well within myself. But just the gratitude was overwhelming, and it's just a great feeling to have that. And the same thing I think holds true with running across the U.S. Heather, of course, was instrumental in that, but I was so damn glad to be done with that. And this holds true for like Everest, and that people ask me, would you ever do that again? Are you kidding me? Why the hell would I do that again? Yeah, I saved all these DNFs so I could, they kind of count toward building fortitude so you can finish things that are really, really tough and really, really important. But what I was thinking when I was on Everest and I was running across America is I've got to finish this here and now, because I do not want to fucking come back and do this again, ever. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It's the perfect answer. I was on a podcast recently, and I was asked if I would do again. And my response was no. Like, I've done the event. It's not that it isn't beautiful. It's not that it isn't gorgeous, but I've done it. And so I can look to some other event at this point, and know that I've done that event, and challenge myself in a different way too. So no, that's the perfect response.
I would like to say that I haven't said that and then went and did it. I've raced Divide 200 twice, and on the last one, my pacer, my friend James, who actually won the 60K this last weekend, I said to him it was like the 300K mark. I said to him at the second time that I did it, I will never be back here. And I literally told him this weekend when we were because we were sharing a hotel room together, said, James, if everything goes as planned for my 2 races in the summer, I might go back to Divide in August and do it for a 3rd time. And he's like, I knew you were lying to me. I knew you were lying to me. So it's, I mean, there's some of those ones where, and I would imagine Badwater is one of those races as well too. You see people go back and back and back and back and back. There's just, and I would imagine that it has nothing to do with the physical effort, but everything that it has to do about the people and the crew and the environment and the legacy and all of the things that attach into it that are what draws people to come back there. The physical thing can only hold you for so long, but the people can hold you for a very long time.
Correct. Right. That's exactly true.
Yeah. So I hope to get there. It's on my list. And don't tell Ray, my coach, that it's still on my list, because he keeps trying to talk me out of it. But it's on my list. I'm going to do it.
Well, you now have a pacer and crew automatically. You have at least one to be there with you.
Yeah, I'm sure. We'll let Scott get his Badwater done, and then he can come in. Yeah. Marshall's in too. Sweet. That's what I like to hear. Lisa already said she would be in too, so that would be quite the team.
I'll help you on the mountain.
Yeah, that's fair. I appreciate
it. Yes, please do, because when I was at pacing and we were going up the mountain, I was like, Allie, I love you, sister, but I'm done. Like, I am not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Love it. So I mean, we can, all these conversations, whenever we have them, we always say at the end, like, man, we could just keep talking for hours, and I know we could. And I mean, there's lots of guests that we definitely want to have back on down the line as we keep doing this thing. And Jason and I have toyed with the idea of adding in, 2 more episodes a month, but we still haven't quite got there. And that's when we'll probably start to be able to bring people back and have, deeper conversations about maybe one specific thing. So, Marshall, I mean, thank you so much for your time. I know there's so many people that have got into ultra running, changed their lives because of the things that you have shown us. So thank you for that. I'm obviously one of those. You and Ray got connected, and now I'm connected with Ray, and it's this cyclical change of, the passing of the guard, the passing of the torch, whatever you want to call it. So I just want to thank you for that, because I mean, I wouldn't be where I am and chasing the things that I am if it wasn't for the stuff that you obviously have done in your career. So I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that comment. Yeah, thank you.
So the way that we like to end the show, Jason and I each have our own question now, which is kind of fun. So whenever he runs the show, he has his question, I have mine. Where is your mind after this conversation today with Jason and I?
You guys, I think you get it, and it's very evident by the questions you ask that you go much deeper than just the actual events and things like that. So, you know, I just appreciate that you guys are paying attention to what's really important.
I mean, I appreciate that compliment, because that's ultimately why Jason and I brought this show to life, was to tell the stories behind the stories. And I'm glad that's resonating with somebody who's, I mean, as seasoned and decorated as you are. I mean, you have old guy in the bottom of your corner of your screen there. So again, from Jason and I, thank you so much, Marshall. Where can people reach out to you the best if they have questions about Route 66 or any of those things, or any of the stuff that you're into, or they just have questions? Where can they find you?
Yeah, they can just, I've got a website. It really hasn't been updated. It's just marshallulrich.com. And then route66.com for, you know, questions about Route 66. So those are the best ways.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Marshall, again, on behalf of Jason and I, thank you so much for your time. I know this is going to resonate with listeners in a deep way, and we can't wait to share it with them. So
Well,
thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Ooh, another one. That was man. Ooh. I'm going to ask you first, Jason. What are you taking away from this episode?
One, the compliment that Marshall gave us about how we get it, and we asked the second question. Most people are asking the first. Very few of us are asking the second. We are the very few. And then the other thing is, he talked about legacy for his grandkids. I don't know if he understands this or if he picked up on it, but in a roundabout sort of way, we are his grandkids, right? Like, he has set the pace, to use a running pun, for us. And so that legacy, you know, is drifting down to athletes like yourself and myself to carry that torch so that we can pass it to the next generation coming up.
Yeah, and well said. Well said. For me, it's really leaning into all the stuff and kind of reaffirming where I am in my life right now, in my running journey with my kids, my family, and really making sure that I did learn that lesson now, so I can have that time with my kids when they're young, 8 and 11. I lost quite a bit of time when I was going through all my mental health stuff with them, and you can look back on and maybe have some regrets about that, but I don't, because it's put me in a position now to be able to be that present father and go for that 5K with them on the Saturday, instead of saying I have to go training alone, you know, and waking up early. And I mean, Stephen that we had on, that just released his episode in June here, and that's the perfect example for me of, like, I want my kids to remember that I was present for them. And if that's something I can take away from this and see, you know, what my dad is doing for my kids as their grandfather, but to know that maybe Marshall wanted to do that earlier, and to know that I have that opportunity now is huge. So that's what I'm going to take away.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share, review, comment, reach out to us. DMs, Jason and I are open books. We're happy to chat. And until next time, keep going the distance and breaking the silence together. Thanks, everybody.